Amen. Thank you, brother. So this week we've been reading three letters, the first and second Peter, also the letter of Jude. So we're going to have our brother Vic tonight give us the devotional. So he's going to take control of the screens. Go ahead, brother.
Thank you, Brother Pedro. Good evening, family. As Brother Pedro mentioned, tonight we will be reviewing the book of First and Second Peter, as well as the book of Jude. All right. So first of all, just before we jump into some actual scriptures, let's just look at some context. Peter was written by the apostle Peter approximately 63 to 64 AD. From Babylon, according to 1 Peter 5:13. Note, it's questionable whether or not if that was literal or if that was code for Rome, because in 1 Peter 5:13 it says, when he's ending his letter there, he says, "She who is at Babylon, who is likewise chosen, sends you greetings, and so does Mark, my son." All right. Second Peter was believed to be written from a Roman prison about 67 AD. And this is now, 30 plus years since the passing of Christ. Now, when he opens the letter, it says to the recipients of the letter were exiles of the dispersion, Jewish Christians in Asia Minor. Right. So I had to go back and look that up. And, 1 Peter 1:1, it says, "To those who are elect exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia." So those were the recipients of this letter that was being addressed. And that term dispersion was used for Israelites that were scattered during the Babylonian and Assyrian captivity. John 7 verse 35 actually references this. It says that when officers they were trying to have Jesus arrested, and they were sent to arrest Jesus. It says Jesus responded in verse 34, "You will see me, you will seek me, and you will not find me. Where I am, you cannot come." The Jews said to one another, where does this man intend to go? That we will not find him. Does he intend to go to the dispersion, right, among the Greeks, the Greeks, and teach the Greeks? So that term dispersion again, were to those that were in Asia Minor. And so I have a map just showing you where that is. It was near the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. There at that time, those places that were mentioned in the letter, you see them there. And when Peter wrote this, many years later, at this point there were Jewish and Greek Christians in that part of the world experiencing some major persecution. And so this is the place he was addressing. Today, that location is, as we know it today, is Turkey, right? Again, surrounded by both the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. And one of the things, or common view that was believed at that time, was that Peter was writing this letter on the eve of King Nero's persecution, right? I'll reference that passage in 1 Peter 4 verses 12. And so you guys may be wondering, who is King Nero, right? So I'm gonna just give you guys a quick background on who Nero was. He was a really mean, evil Roman emperor that provided cultural entertainment to the people of Rome at that time, right? So one of the things that Nero did is that, he would have Christians be burned publicly in stadiums, and he would also have them, attacked by, wild animals. As you can see, for some of the young kids out there, you see, really for all of us, the need for Christ because of some of the evil things that were happening, right? So, this visual here, you can see people filled up in a stadium praying as they are about to be, attacked by some animals. You can see over here that there are also, people on crosses being burned, and he did this as a form of entertainment. And just to give you some background on the type of man Nero was, it's believed that he had his mother murdered and his wife executed, right? And so he was, a politician at the time that, was optimistic. He was known to burn areas of the city to acquire land after failed attempts. And, he got a lot of criticism for some of the evil things that he did from the people of Rome about burning land and territory so that he could take it. And so one of the things that he did to deflect his criticism was he blamed the community of Christians in Rome for the fires that were happening. And so that was really the start of some of the horrific persecutions to Christians. And so in addition to him, trying to take these things, he also, was very hostile towards Christians because in the first century, many of them refused to, worship the Caesars so there were charges brought against Christians for treason. All right, so I'm going to go now to 1 Peter chapter 4. So as I mentioned that this letter was believed that Peter wrote it on the eve of Nero's persecution, where he was going to, take more Christians and do this. He says, "Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial," right? And so one of the things that you'll see is that Peter is addressing here a lot of the suffering that some of the Christians were going through. He says, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. He says, but rejoice. And so as far as you share in Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed, right? If you are insulted for the name of Christ, you are blessed because of the Spirit of glory and the God and of God that rests upon you. He goes on to speak about not suffering as a thief or a murderer or some of those other things. But in verse 19, he says, therefore, let those who suffer according to God's will entrust their souls to a faithful creator while doing good. Okay, so, part of what Peter was addressing was the things that they were going to go through. So some of the themes here, I just want to share is that Peter wanted to remind the saints of their identity and the special privileges that they had as being God's holy nation, right? So in 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9, it speaks about you being a holy, the church of God, a holy nation, citizens belonging to God, God's household. And the reality is when you're going through trial, when you're going through a fiery trial, do you feel special? Do you feel like I'm the chosen one? We don't always feel that way. We feel sometimes we've been forgotten. Sometimes, maybe God isn't with us. But Peter, wants to remind them, no, God is with you. And you know what? No matter what your circumstance, live obediently to Christ, right? Live with proper conduct, no matter what your circumstances, because, the reality is when you're being mistreated, or hurt or going through your trial, you don't necessarily feel, this way, as I've mentioned, but Peter wants to remind them of what they have access to, right? So he tells them, look, you've been in 1 Peter 1, verses 3 through 5, some of the things he lists there, he says, you've been born to a living hope an inheritance that is imperishable, right? It means it doesn't rot. An inheritance that is undefiled, right? It can't be tampered with. What God has in store for those that he loves cannot be tampered with. Even though you're experiencing trials while you're in this flesh, right? It's unfading, meaning that it never gets worn out. And guess what, brothers and sisters? It's kept in heaven for you, right? It's kept in heaven for you. So no matter what you're going through, what God has in store, no man can take that from you. And so the third theme here is throughout First Peter is to keep your eyes fixed on Jesus in the face of persecution, in the face of adversity. I know that we've gone through so much in the past years, with COVID, with sickness, being apart as a church family. But you know what? It's important that we fix our eyes on Jesus, that we still live right. It says in 1 Peter 2, beloved, as sojourners and exiles, abstain from the passions of the flesh, which wage war against your soul. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, right? So that when they speak about you as evildoers, they may see the good deeds, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day of his visitation, all right? So what you do with your pain, brothers and sisters, what you do in your moment of struggle, it speaks through the ages, right? So think about Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. Think about, from a worldly perspective, people say, oh, Michael Jordan, when he was sick, and he had the flu, he still went out there and played and he dropped, I forget how many, almost 40 points or so, right? It was a moment that he, went through that adversity and he shined. And how much more, right? The disciples of Christ, right? So in these moments, it's important to fix your eyes on Jesus, right? 1 Peter 1 verse 13 speaks about prepare your minds for action, be sober-minded, right? Set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8 through 10, again, it says, be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, he's prowling around like a lion waiting to devour you. When you're going through the struggle, guess what, brothers, sisters, we're vulnerable, right? We're vulnerable in those moments. And when we're vulnerable, you know what, we're more susceptible to prey. But when we fix our eyes on Jesus, right, even in the midst of the storm, we fix our eyes on Jesus, you know what, he can carry you through. And he says, after you've suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. All right. So, when you're going through that pain, you know what, that doesn't define who you are, right? When you fix your eyes on Jesus, God will carry you through. He will. And many of you guys have stories to tell. That's one of the things about our congregation. We have so many people who've gone through different things and they've come through the storm shining like stars. If I go really quickly to the theme of 2 Peter, let's see here. Slide doesn't want to change. Let's see. Okay. Slide is not changing, but
I can take you back.
Okay, no problem. You can go to the next slide, Pedro, please.
This one.
Yes, I'm on the 2 Peter themes. It's the slide after this one, if it'll go. So while you're going, I'll speak through it. Really, the theme of 2 Peter is really to remind the saints about the attributes that they should be growing in. Okay, so Peter says, by way of reminder, I want to remind you of certain things that you be growing in your faith, your knowledge, your brotherly kindness. And he speaks about how you can first do that, right? The divine power that God has given you. And then the second theme throughout that book is to be aware of false teachers. All right. So those are the themes of 1st and 2 Peter. The theme of Jude, let's see if we can get there. That doesn't want to move. Okay. Really the theme of Jude is to warn you against the rise of false prophets, and really do your best to, to keep yourself built up in the faith so that you're not susceptible to them, right? So, throughout the scriptures, we see in Matthew 24, verses 11 through 13, that Jesus warned that, there'll be the rise of many prophets. He says, and many prophets will arise and lead many astray. And because of lawlessness will be increased, the love of many will grow cold, right? But the one who endures to the end will be saved. So really important that, we endure to the end. Paul later warned that, in Acts 20, verses 29 through 30, that many disciples would be drawn away, right? So again, brothers, there's a lot going on in our times. We want to make sure that, nothing is drawing us away. And he writes there, I know that after my departure, this is Paul in Acts 20, verse 29 through 30, he says, fierce wolves will come in among you, not sparing the flock. And from among your own selves will rise men twisted, speaking twisted things and drawing disciples away. So now Second Peter also speaks about false prophets. Now Peter is warning us about the rise of false teachers. He says, but false prophets also will, arose among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you who will bring destructive heresies, even denying the master who brought them in. And then we get to Jude, and Jude is now writing to inform us, guess what? The false prophets, they are now in your midst, right? He wants you to know that they are now in your midst. And in Jude, verse 1, verse 12, he says, these are the hidden reefs at your love feast, as they feast with you without fear, shepherding, feeding themselves. And he describes them as waterless clouds swept away by the winds, fruitless trees in late autumn, twisted, dead, and uprooted. Right. So those are really the themes of First and Second Peter, right? Like reminding the saints of their identity, during their times of struggle, living obediently, to Christ, no matter what your circumstances, keeping your eyes fixed on Jesus, being aware of false teachers, building yourself up in this faith. All right. So, that is what I had this evening to share with all of you. There's so many nuggets in First and Second Peter, but I hope you've enjoyed the reading. I hope you were encouraged tonight by just this brief summary. We're going to stop now and break out into our breakout rooms, and I look forward to some great discussion. So God bless you all, and we'll break out now.
And I will praise you, O Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, reaching to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. And be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. And be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. And be exalted, O God, above the heavens. Let your glory be over all the earth. God bless you, everyone.